for Tuesday, the 20th of June. Can I remind you that the meeting is being live streamed and recorded? The recording will be made available on the Comhairle's website following the meeting. Item number 1 on today's agenda is the minute of the meeting of the 2nd of May this year, and that's for your approval. Members happy with that? Yep. Item number 2, declaration of interest. Members are asked to declare any interest they may have in any items of the agenda. It would be helpful if members explained why they are declaring an interest in the item concerned. Any motion or amendment in relation to a planning application must be based solely on planning reasons. If a member moves an amendment, the chair will invite him or her to clearly articulate the amendment and the planning reasons upon which it is based. Thereafter, the chair may at his discretion continue the business of the meeting in accordance with the timeout protocol. A copy of the timeout protocol has been made available to all members via the Planning Applications Boards folder on SharePoint. The Planning Manager for the Development Management Team will present the recommendation of officers. In the event of a member seeking to move an amendment, the Chair may call upon the legal advisor or the planning advisor to provide advice to the board. Item number 3. Councillor MacLeod online.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm declaring an interest in item number 3 as an employee and shareholder of Kinetic who are involved in the partnership. So I will leave the meeting for this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. MacLeod. Item number 3 in the agenda. This is the construction of suborbital vertical launch spaceport at Scolpig, Isle of North Uist. This planning application has been a subject to more than 6 valid representations that raise material planning considerations and is considered by the appointed officers to be sensitive. The application is therefore presented to the board for decision. Morag Ferguson and Anne Napier will speak to the report and answer any questions thereafter. Mrs. Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. The report before the board today is lengthy, with several appendices. The report has been circulated to all members site and also on the online planning portal. Today's presentation will provide an overview of the proposed development. It will take members through some of the visual images of the site, along with photo montages, and we will briefly outline the overall assessment of the planning merits as undertaken. The proposed development raises a range of planning and environmental issues and is prone to be a controversial proposal, and it has been a complex case to assess. This presentation is likely to take about 45 minutes. Thereafter, we will be happy to answer any questions on the report and presentation. I'll allow members to read this slide, which summarises the details of the applicant, the determining authority, and the notification direction which is in place from Scottish ministers. This notification requires that Scottish ministers be notified if the planning application resolves to approve the application today. Okay, moving on. The application is classed as a local development in terms of the Town and Country Planning Hierarchy of Developments Scotland regulations. The submitted environmental impact assessment report and the supplementary environmental information are presented in 4 volumes, each comprised of a main EIA report, a set of drawings, figures and visualizations, and also appendices and annexes, technical annexes. A non-technical summary was also provided as required by the EIA regulations. This was revised following submission as part of the submission of the supplementary environmental information. This has been provided as Appendix 7 to the committee report. I can confirm that the EIA report and the supplementary environmental information have been examined, and this has informed the assessment of the planning application. Planning permission considers both the development and the use of land. In this instance, the proposed development works, while generating some impacts, are relatively modest. However, the use means that a range of different impacts arise far beyond the site boundary, and these have required to be assessed. The application seeks permission for permanent generic infrastructure to host the launch of suborbital sounding of research launch vehicles. The proposed launch vehicles represent a class of vehicle that are capable of operating above the stratosphere but will not enter orbit. It's proposed that individual launch operators would use the site for static testing of rocket systems, or alternatively, each launch vehicle would be launched on a pre-designated trajectory limited to orientations to the north and northwest of Skolpig, and we'll have a slide later on to illustrate that. A launch vehicle typically comprises 1 or more stages and would have a lift-off mass of between 150 kilograms to 2.5 tons. The nature and composition of the payloads or the instruments being carried by the launch vehicle would vary, but they're likely to comprise atmospheric monitoring instrumentation, imaging systems, security equipment and communication technology, and these would have weights ranging between 2 kilograms and 100 kilograms. It's also worth highlighting that the proposed development and its subsequent use would be subject to a range of other regulatory regimes, and that planning is not required to manage the impacts that would be managed through these other regulatory regimes. For example, spaceport licence required from the Civil Aviation Authority, or marine licences required from Marine Scotland. The application seeks planning permission for use of the site as a spaceport for suborbital launch and for works required to provide the necessary permanent and temporary infrastructure to support that use. In terms of the permanent infrastructure, the extent of the new development on the site would be relatively modest. There would be new parking areas proposed to the site entrance, which would allow public parking adjacent to the farm complex, and an upgraded and widened access road, a section of new access road out to the launch pad, some laybys, a launch pad and the associated tanks and equipment. The tanks and equipment would include a pumped water supply for the launch pad, a liquid storage containment tank, a water storage tank and fencing. One of the existing farm buildings, otherwise labelled as Bar 2, would be upgraded to form a workshop, communications room and storage. And then the recently reinstated agricultural use of the wider farm would continue alongside the spaceport operation. This slide shows the location of Skolpig Farm on the northwest coast of North Uist. Skolpig Farm is about 276 hectares, and the suborbital spaceport site comprises 1.82 hectares of that total area, and is mainly grassland. It's maybe not that clear from the image, but the red line shown within that blue outlined area is the application site. This slide shows the application site in more detail. So you have, starting at the bottom right of the slide, new parking and an extended Belmouth junction. Then the access track itself will be upgraded and widened. Where you cross the loch, at the moment the loch operates as two largely separate hydrological components because the culvert is too small. A new box culvert will be installed across Loch Scolpig with an improved crossing that would allow the original hydrological connectivity to be restored. Then as you travel up towards the farmsteading, there would be a parking and turning area for launch operators adjacent to the farm buildings. This area would also include a space for 2 shipping containers to be stationed. 1 buyer and buyer 2 would be upgraded and reused. And then out to the north, a launch pad would be constructed with pipe drainage and the tanks for water which would be used for containing any fuel spillage and any contaminated water would be located out by the launch pad. The plan also shows the proposed pumped water supply surrounding the launch pad for water deluge, a liquid storage containment tank adjacent to the access road, and a below ground soakaway and water storage tank adjacent to buyer 2. I'll now pass you over to Anne, who will take you through some of the detail of the proposal. Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. 10 new public parking spaces, including 1 accessible space and 2 spaces for longer vehicles, would be provided at the site entrance. The existing pedestrian kissing gate would be replaced with a standard gate, which would be easier to use by people with restricted mobility. Through the preparation and implementation of the Habitat and Amenity Management Plan, the applicant has indicated a willingness to explore the further potential for vehicle access into the site for people with disabilities, but the details of this do not form part of the current proposals. Next slide, please. The access road would be extended by about 130 metres from the complex of farm buildings to the launch pad, passing through the farmyard. The concrete launch pad would incorporate an integrated sump, which would be fitted with a shut-off valve. The pad loading area would be crushed rock hardstanding and provide for vehicle turning and tower installation. One of the existing buyers, as Morag has said earlier, would be repurposed for use as a store and communication centre. A new door would be installed in the end elevation. A large galvanised water tank would be installed behind the farm building to contain wash water and fire hydrant water, which is being shown on the slide now. The proposal would provide for up to 10 launch events each year. During each launch event, an area of marine waters to the north and west of the site would be subject to an exclusion zone for other marine users for a defined period of time. At the same time, an area of defined airspace would be subject to exclusion for other aviation users. This would be subject to specific notification requirements, which is covered by other regulations, such as notification to airmen and notification to mariners. The facility would be managed by a spaceport operator and would require a licence from the Civil Aviation Authority. In addition, there would be a range operator who would work closely with each launch operator. A detailed safety case for each launch would need to be made to the Civil Aviation Authority by the range operator and the launch operator in conjunction with the spaceport operator. Any deposits in the seabed or impacts on maritime users from launches would be managed by Marine Scotland through the marine licensing regime. This slide shows the Space Launch Hazard Area, which is the cross-hatched area, the existing MOD Hebrides Range Danger Area, D701, which are the red lines shown on the slide. As you can see, the majority of the Space Launch Hazard Area would be contained within the existing MOD Hebrides Range Danger Area, with the area of the Space Launch Hazard Area, which is outside of the danger area, wholly located within Scottish airspace. Some flight trajectories may enter Irish airspace, and current protocols exist for the MOD Hebrides Range Danger Area with the Civil Aviation Authority and the Irish Airspace Authority to manage this interface. This next slide shows a representative launch to illustrate the potential launch impacts. In practice, actual launches would be likely to follow a variety of different trajectories. As you can see from the inset portion of the slide, the portion of the overall Space Launch Hazard Area affected for this particular launch example can be seen in the inset. The solid dark blue line indicates the overall boundary of the Space Launch Hazard Area. The darker teal-coloured area indicates the area of the warning zone, and then two darker brown areas represent the two marine exclusion zone areas, with the dashed green line the representative trajectory of the launch vehicle. The temporary exclusion zones for each launch would last for up to approximately 4 hours until the area is safe to transit, which is the likely window of available airspace. Mariners would still be able to transit through the larger warning zone, the teal area, within and around the flight path. The site is also located close to several important environmental sites, including a number of sites of European and national importance, such as special areas for conservation, special protection areas, and sites of special scientific interest. Due to the potential for likely significant effects on several European sites, both SACs and SPAs, a habitat regulations appraisal appropriate assessment has been undertaken, and this is included as Appendix 3 to the committee report. This concluded that the proposal would result in no significant adverse impacts on the integrity of the designated sites. The site is also used by or hosts some species that are important, including breeding and foraging birds, otter, and great yellow bumblebee. The likely impact of the proposal on these species has also been assessed, with changes made through the application process and in the submission of supplementary environmental information to minimise the likely effect on corncrake, for example. And this slide shows the location of the application site in relation to designated onshore environmental sites. So the SPAs that are close to the site are shown in lilac. The RSPB Bird Reserve at Balranald is outlined in green to the southwest of the site. And as you can see, other sites are outlined in lilac around the application site. This slide shows the site in relation to relevant offshore environmental designations. The application site and launch pad is represented by a red dot. The Space Launch Hazard Area is outlined in blue. The SPAs are shown in lilac. And the slide also illustrates the avoidance of both St Kilda and the Flannan Isles by the Space Launch Hazard Area. So in both the locations identified there. This slide indicates the boundary of the National Scenic Area, which runs close to the site. The assessment that's been undertaken has taken into account the impacts of the development on the National Scenic Area. In addition, there are several designated and non-designated heritage assets in the vicinity of the proposed development, including Sculpeg Farmstead, the scheduled monument of Loch Sculpeg Dún and Tower, a post-medieval township settlement. The dual status World Heritage Site of St Kilda is located approximately 65 kilometres to the west, as we saw on an earlier slide. The slide shows identified designated and non-designated heritage assets that have been assessed as having the potential to be directly or physically affected by the proposed development. Other heritage assets which are further from the site have been identified as having the potential to be indirectly affected in relation to their setting. The slide shows in purple the location of the Sculpeg Dún and Tower scheduled monument in relation to the application site. The inset box shows the various elements of the proposals in relation to identified heritage assets, both buildings and also archaeological remains. Given its context and the site conditions, there is considered to be a high potential for currently unidentified remains on the site. As this potential is currently unknown, the significance of any such remains is also unknown. But the proposals have taken a precautionary approach, with the provision for further assessment and mitigation to be undertaken as part of the development process. The next section of the presentation provides some images of the site, including in the form of photomontage visualizations of the development in place. This photograph was taken at the beginning of this month and looks north from the main A865 public road to the south of the site. The farmhouse you can see beyond the loch to the left of and separated from the group of farm buildings, which is to the right. And then the scheduled monument Dún and Tower can be seen on the island in the loch with the causeway to the right-hand side of the photograph. The poles carrying the electricity line to the farmhouse are also visible, and then the Atlantic coast can be seen just beyond the complex of farm buildings. This photograph was taken at the same time as the last one and looks west from the road. The islands of Hashka can be clearly seen, with those of St Kilda faintly visible on the horizon. The loch and tower are also visible, together with the ruins of a building from the former township in the foreground. So this visualization forms part of the application submissions and was taken at the first representative viewpoint, viewpoint 1 at Sculpeg. It's a photo montage and shows the temporary infrastructure that would be associated with a launch in position at the launch site. The image shows a view with a mobile launch tower in position. There were 5 representative viewpoints assessed with the landscape and visual impact assessment submissions, which form part of the supplementary environmental information submissions. There were a further 3 viewpoints assessed in relation to the setting of cultural heritage assets. And these images were published in the online file as part of volume 2 of the SEI submissions. A sample of the images has been selected from the range available to include with the presentation today. This second image is from the representative viewpoint, the second one, which is taken from the location of the approved but not yet constructed St Kilda Viewpoint Visitor Centre. It again shows a mobile launch tower in position at the proposed site to the right of the image as indicated. And in addition, the proposed car park at the site entrance is shown, together with vehicles and units in the laybys alongside the access track and 2 storage containers in place adjacent to the farm buildings. The top of the proposed liquid containment tank adjacent to the extended access road to the launch pad can also be seen, a sort of pale colour. The proposed site can be seen in relation to the existing farm buildings, the dune and the tower, the Loch and the Atlantic coast. And again, the islands of St Kilda are faintly visible on the horizon, with those of Hashka more clearly seen closer to the coast. This visualisation image is taken from representative viewpoint 3, which is to the north of the site, with the coast to the right-hand side of the photo. It shows the application site with the option of a temporary lattice tower, launch tower, in place. And the proposed launch towers would either be as shown in this image or in the form of a tower rail as shown in the next image. So this image is taken from the same location, but with a temporary mobile launch tower in position on the launch pad. The choice of the type of tower and its size would vary depending on the requirements of the individual launch operator. The overall height of the tower, of whichever type, would not exceed 20 metres. The length of an individual launch campaign would not exceed 14 days on site, and each launch event would not exceed 1 day in length, although delays due to technical issues or for weather reasons could see a launch postponed for 1 or 2 days. A period of 3 days has therefore been used to assess the likely impacts associated with individual launch events where activity levels are likely to be highest and the temporary infrastructure would be on site. And no more than 10 launch events are proposed per year. This image is taken from representative viewpoint 4 from the public road to the south of the site. It shows the site with the permanent elements of the proposed development in place. Between launch campaigns and events, from this location looking towards the farm complex, the changes to the farm buildings and that part of the site would not be readily visible in public views. The changes to the site entrance and the upgraded access track and laybys would be more clearly seen. Some of these changes would be less noticeable once the vegetation alongside the access track had regenerated. But this image is taken from the same viewpoint as the last, but with the temporary infrastructure in place for a launch event. It shows the site with an integrated mobile launch tower and the delivery vehicle positioned at the launch pad. And then 2 shipping containers can also be seen located in the area between the farmhouse and the farm buildings. This view is taken from a passing place close to the site entrance on the main A865 road. It again shows a mobile launch tower in place for a launch event with 2 shipping containers adjacent to the farm buildings. Parked vehicles and equipment are also visible along the access track, which is to the far right-hand side of the photo, as indicated, just to the right of the passing place sign. This view is taken from the entrance to the site from the junction of the access road with the public road. The scheduled monument Dunan Tower is visible to the left of the image. To the right, the image shows part of the proposed parking area adjacent to the site entrance gates and part of the proposed upgraded and widened access road into the site, including the causeway. The main part of the site is shown with 2 shipping containers in place and a lattice launch tower. And this image shows the proposal in relation to the tower. It includes the temporary components representative of a launch event, including 2 shipping containers adjacent to the farm buildings and the mobile launch tower in place on the launch pad.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Just to confirm that the 252 individuals made valid representations to the application, in addition to a link which was received to a petition of objection for over 990 signatures. The application had been advertised as an EIA application in both the Edinburgh Gazette and the Stornoway Gazette, both in relation to the original submission and following receipt of the supplementary supplementary environmental information, and the documentation was made available as advertised in those publications. The overwhelming majority of the comments received objected to the proposed development, with a small number in support of the proposal. Many of the representations received were highly detailed, and the level of public engagement through those third-party contributions aided the scrutiny of the application. The issues raised in representation have been grouped under common themes within the committee report, and they are also summarised in appendices 5 and 6 attached to the report. Statutory consultation was undertaken as required by planning and EIA regulations. Additional non-statutory specialist consultation was also undertaken. The matters raised in consultation have been summarised and considered on an issue-by-issue basis within the committee report. Detailed comments of all consultation responses are available to view on the online application file. A collated summary of all the consultation responses is attached as Appendix 4 to the committee report. The EIA report and the supplementary environmental information have been examined in light of the consultation responses and the comments made in public representations. The matters raised in representation by consultees, the findings of the examination of the EIA and the SEI reports, together with any other relevant material considerations, have been assessed for their planning merit and given due weight. I'll pass you back to Anne just to take you through the aspects that were assessed.
Thank you, Morag. The planning assessment undertaken and set out within the committee report considers the proposal in relation to a number of issues before weighing those in the planning balance and reaching a reasoned conclusion and recommendation. The range of issues covered in the report is shown in this slide, with each main issue indicated by an icon. And each main issue is structured to set out, firstly, the policy context for that issue. Secondly, the relevant aspect of the EIA report as amended by the supplementary environmental information. Thirdly, the responses that were received from consultees and the public. And finally, having regard to all these factors, a planning assessment in respect of that issue. The development proposed is intended to be a permanent facility. As such, detailed consideration of potential impacts resulting from decommissioning and site restoration has not been given to each issue. However, the scale of new built development proposed is relatively modest, as Morag said earlier. Project infrastructure, including the containment tank, water storage tank, and site fencing, are intended to be removed from the site should operations cease. Access infrastructure and hard standing is proposed to remain in place to facilitate access to the site as a grazing resource and as part of ongoing habitat management requirements. It's not feasible to attempt to summarise the findings of each main issue within the presentation today. However, they are clearly set out within the committee report. Generally, in respect to most of the issues identified, for the reasons set out within the report and subject to the satisfactory implementation of identified mitigation measures, the proposed development has been assessed as likely to have a largely neutral effect. The potential for cumulative effects was also considered as part of the planning assessment process and were considered not to alter the findings in relation to the main issues. The approach taken to the consideration of reasonable alternatives to the proposal was also found to be satisfactory. The impact of the proposal on human rights, the public sector equality duty, and the best interests of the child has also been considered. The proposal would not have a disproportionate effect in these respects, and it would not hinder the advancement of equality or the need to foster good relations between people. The assessment has found that modest harm would likely result in relation to residual effects on landscape and coastal character and on visual amenity by affecting views of the Skulpeg Farm area. There would also be significant harm in relation to one representative viewpoint. It's considered that this harm should be given significant weight. Adverse effects have also been identified to the significance and special interests of Skulpeg Farmstead and on Skulpeg Tower through disrupting and detracting from key views, diminishing the dominance of the tower and markedly diminishing the existing distinct sense of place. The non-permanent nature of these effects reduces the extent of this harm. But nonetheless, while relatively modest, the resulting harm is material and it is considered it should be given considerable importance and weight in light of the planning policy context. The proposal would result in the additional generation of greenhouse gas emissions and would have a negative influence on the progressive reductions in local CO2 emissions. Although residual effects on climate change in these regards would be very limited, it is considered that significant weight should be given to the resulting harm given the planning policy context. One of the key benefits of the proposal would be the provision of space launch infrastructure, which would meet a clearly identified need as set out in national UK and Scottish policy documents. There are locational constraints for such development for technical, environmental and safety reasons. The provision of a dedicated suborbital launch facility for use by a number of different operators would meet an identified need for such provision. Given the support for such development within national space policy documents, it is considered that these benefits would be significant and should be given substantial weight. The proposal would also result in identified social and economic benefits in terms of job creation and income. Although likely to be relatively modest, given the island context for the site, they are considered likely to be significant. Insofar as the provision of education and training would support these effects, they would add further weight to those benefits. Overall, it's considered they should be given significant weight. The preparation and implementation of the Habitat and Amenity Management Plan would also be beneficial in terms of access for recreational users. The potential for biodiversity and habitat enhancements would add further weight to those benefits. Whilst relatively modest, it is considered that they would be a clear benefit of the proposal that should also be given significant weight. Overall, it's concluded that the considerable and significant weight given to the harm to the historic environment, to climate change, and to landscape and visual impacts as set out within the report would be clearly outweighed by the substantial weight given to the delivery of space infrastructure that would offer national benefits, coupled with the significant weight given to the modest socio-economic benefits and the preparation and implementation of the Habitat and Amenity Management Plan. The Supplementary Environmental Information Appendix C amended and replaced the originally submitted schedule of proposed mitigation measures. These have been taken into account, along with responses from consultees and others that made reference to the need for potential mitigation. The list of conditions recommended to be applied is attached to the committee report as Appendix 1. In drafting these, careful regard has been given to the comments received and also to the tests for conditions as set out in National Planning Framework 4. This includes consideration of the potential regulatory and licensing requirements, which would be subject to control under other mechanisms separate to the planning system, and the need to avoid applying conditions in relation to these matters. For the reasons set out in the report, and in common with other large or complex developments, it is considered a 5-year time limit should be applied for the commencement of development on site. In addition, conditions are recommended to limit the extent and scope of development to that applied for, require the approval of detailed aspects of the design, and to control details of the construction and operational phases of the development, including in relation to the environment, pollution control, traffic arrangements, working hours, community notification arrangements, the establishment of a fisheries forum, archaeological mitigation, and to require the preparation and implementation of a habitat and amenity management plan and the preparation of a preservation and conservation strategy for Skulpeg farmhouse and farm buildings.
Chair, this takes us to the conclusion of the presentation and the recommendation which has been detailed on the slide before you there. Planning authorities are required to determine planning applications in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. An assessment has been carried out against the provisions of National Planning Framework 4 and the Outer Hebrides Local Development Plan, as well as the National Marine Plan, and consideration has been given to all material planning considerations. An assessment of the proposed development has been undertaken, which has been informed by the EIA report and the supplementary environmental information, comments of the consultees, and representations made by members of the public. This concludes with the overall assessment of the likely significant effects of the proposal and the planning balance. Mitigation measures that are considered necessary and can be secured by planning conditions have been identified. Other mitigation measures would be subject to other regulatory or licensing controls and secured through those mechanisms. For the reasons set out in the report and outlined above, it is concluded that the likely benefits of the proposal would outweigh the harm identified. Overall, it is considered that the proposal would satisfactorily meet the policy requirements of the development plan taken as a whole and would be acceptable, including in relation to its effects on the environment. The recommendation is therefore that the report be considered and noted and the application be approved, subject to the requirements of the Scottish Minister's Notification Direction. That concludes the presentation for this morning. Anne and I are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Morag and Anne, for that extremely extensive and comprehensive report. And credit to yourselves and indeed the wider department and all the work carried out for it. I'd now like to open this out to the floor. Do any members have questions or comments they wish to raise at this time? Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much. I don't know if this is the right forum, but I'll ask the question anyway. The only daft question is the unasked one. How long will the project take to be up and running? Is the first part of my question. And the second part is it right and proper that we can get local used firms who are needing work, given the current circumstances, to be getting that work in this construction? Thank you.
Mrs. Ferguson.
Thank you, Councillor Barry. The construction phase is estimated to be approximately around about 40 weeks, so just shy of a year. Obviously, there will be variation to that depending on timing, weather, and the need to comply with the mitigation that's set out in conditions. It's not really for the planning system to consider how the contract will be, how contracts will be let, but there is like a community wealth building initiative of which the council are part, and it may be that through that forum there is a possibility that that work could be let locally.
Thank you, George. Councillor Macaulay.
Thanks, Chair. I have no questions, but I secondly want to I just want to add my what am I trying to say? Sorry. I just want to add that what a very comprehensive and well written report and presented, just to back up what Ronald has already said. It's a credit to all of the staff in here that this report was done. And thank you very much for taking this report in front of us.
Ian. If the board permits me, I have a question relating to marine assets. I note that within the report, the Western Isles Fishermen's Association have raised some concerns relating to the possibility of inshore and pelagic fishing within the space launch hazard area might be impacted. Any details of what assurances they've been given in terms of mitigation? Councillor McNeill, just put your light off for a wee second. Sorry, thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Within the environmental assessment report and supplementary environmental information, there is a commitment by the applicant to engage with a fisheries forum to best manage the short periods of time that marine activity would be restricted. If I can take members back to this slide, that is details a representative launch with a typical zone designated. In the inset, this particular example shows that the actual area of any kind of launch will take up a very small part of the space hazard launch area at any one time. And while that launch is in progress, which is a window of 4 hours in any particular launch event, there would be restrictions in the area that is total exclusion from the area where deposits may land, and also an area near the shore. This is an exclusion zone where access would be advised against, but would not be prohibited. So vessels could still transit this area during a launch event. And do you wish to add anything to that?
Yes, thank you. The actual time period for the launch is likely to be between about 2 and 12 minutes maximum. So although there would be a 4-hour window, which would coincide with the time period of available airspace, if the launch were to take place at the beginning of that window, then the 4 hours wouldn't be required for the exclusion zone. Once the launch had taken place, then the exclusion zone would be cleared, and that would be undertaken in line with the existing arrangements that are in place for the use of the MOD danger area that operates in that area. So there would be a notification to mariners before the launch took place in line with those requirements, and then as soon as the launch had been completed, mariners would also be notified.
Thank you both for that. Vice Chair.
Thank you, and thanks Morag and the team for this excellent report. That brings up something that you've just said just now. It's regarding community consultation. Have they been consulted regarding procedure around a launch day event?
Mrs. Ferguson.
Thank you, Vice Chair. In terms of the planning application, because this is a development which is classed as a local development in terms of the planning hierarchy, there was no statutory requirement to consult on the planning application through the planning process. However, the developer did engage with the community in relation to the proposed development. They carried out those consultations voluntarily. In relation to the launch events, there would be a protocol in place that would involve notifications and engagement with the community prior to each launch event. But it's included as one of the mitigations within the schedule of mitigation.
Okay. Councillor McNeill.
Thank you, Chair. Like my colleagues have said, an excellent, thorough report that doesn't leave many questions unanswered. How many of the objectors were of a West Niles postcode?
Mrs. Ferguson.
That information isn't readily available to me, and the regulations require that a planning application is advertised and anybody from anywhere has the right to contribute. Part of the purpose of involving the wider community, it's not just local community, it's the public at large, is that there are lots of specialists out there in the world who can scrutinise and provide contributions, and that aids the whole transparency and assessment of the application.
Thank you.
So McNeill. Councillor Hussain online.
Thank you very much. Thanks all of you for the report. Unless I missed it, and I do apologize if I did miss anything in the report, is there any restriction, obviously, when we talk about the window of lunch and the restriction for 4 hours? Is there any, in terms of social hours, is there like from 9 to 8, or can you launch anytime through the 24-hour period, or?
Mrs. Ferguson. Mrs. Napier, can you answer that question of Councillor Hussain's?
Yes, I can. Thank you. It's intended that all launch operations would be carried out between 7 in the morning and 9 at night, Monday to Friday, and between 8 in the morning and 7 at night on Saturday, with no Sunday working. There may be a requirement for ancillary sort of spaceport activities such as security patrols and things to happen outside those times, but those times are the times indicated by the applicant that would be required, and they can be managed by the mitigation measures and as a condition recommended within Appendix 1.
Thank you very much. In light of just the timing, was there any specific question of impact raised by a nearby habitation or inhabitant? So just.
Mrs. Ferguson.
Sorry, Anne, do you want to go ahead?
Thank you. I was just going to explain that the application has been considered by colleagues in environmental health. They've assessed the likely noise impact and potential for disturbance, and we have had access to their specialist advice and their comments in looking at the proposal. Subject to the mitigation measures that are recommended, it's considered that the impacts wouldn't be unacceptably harmful.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Do members have any other questions or comments they wish to add? Therefore, do members agree the recommendations at 3.1 in this report that, subject to the requirement of the notification direction, the EIA planning application be approved subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1? Do members of the board agree?
Agree.
Yep. Thank you. That's there for the finding of item 3. Okay, members, with your agreement, we'll take a short break for 5 minutes, short comfort break, and reconvene thereafter. Thank you. I hereby reconvene this meeting of the Planning Application Board for the 20th of June 2023. Moving on to item number 4 in the agenda. This is to erect 12 single-storey semi-detached houses at Ferry Road, Leverborough, Isle of Harris. This planning application has been a subject to more than 6 representations and is therefore presented to the board for decision. Morag Ferguson will speak to the report and answer any questions thereafter. Mrs. Ferguson.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Planning application has so the planning application, as the Chair has said, is to erect 12 single-storey semi-detached houses for affordable homes. Each would have an air source heat pump, and the proposal is to allow them to be constructed over 2 phases. There will be a new access road and turning head created, and associated with that there will be a widening and an alteration of the level on Ferry Road at the new access intersection. There would be surface water drainage would be installed, sustainable urban drainage attenuation basin, and there would be connections installed to connect to the public sewer. There's also a need to create like a landscaped mound feature to act both as a visual screen and also to attenuate noise generated from the industrial area and the harbour, and also to utilise disturbed peat from the foundations of the housing area to carry out peatland restoration adjacent to the housing site. The site is located within the village of Leverborough, very close to the existing industrial estate and pier. It comprises a gaps, it fits into a gap site on Ferry Road. The site is within the rural settlement of Leverborough in relation to the spatial strategy of the Outer Hebrides Local Development Plan. Leverborough has the ferry slipway, which services the inter-island link between Harris and Uist. There's also a commercial fishing harbour there, and there are a range of industrial and commercial uses in the industrial area and on the other side of the road from the former industrial area. Leverborough itself is largely residential, but it has a wide range of amenities, including a primary school, shop, fuel station, care home, churches, a recently completed community hub, and public house, restaurant, and other businesses. The site has a landscape character classification of dispersed crofting, and in common with the rest of Harris, it's within the within the South Lewis, Harris and North Uist National Scenic Area. In terms of natural heritage, it's also very close to the boundary of the west coast of the Outer Hebrides Special Protection Area, which is designated for waterfowl and seabirds. It's just an aerial view of the site in the context of the settlement of Leverborough. So coming in from the north here, coming along through the village wraps around the loch and continues down to Rodel, and then this is the original ferry road, which provides the link through down to the settlements of Strond. The site itself, Strond and Borsdale, the site itself is in this gap between the traditional houses on Ferry Road, and as you move into the more modern housing development as you enter Strond. This whole area here is the industrial area, the pier marshalling area, slipway jetty, and also where the lifeboat is stationed. The development site itself is partially brownfield. It's not the easiest site to develop. It is currently undeveloped, and historically the site was part of Lord Leverhulme's ill-fated 1920s fish processing and canning project. Some of the remains from that project are visible on the site. The site area, the wider site area is 2.36 hectares, of which just shy of 1 hectare is proposed for the development of the housing. The remainder of the site is for the access road, parking, turning areas, the surface water and the drainage connections, as well as the peat restoration and landscaping. The housing is nearest to the residential properties on Ferry Road, with the nearest houses properties being 23 and 16 metres respectively away from the edge of the development. Associated with Lord Leverhulme's project to the northeast, on an elevated area of land, there is a Category B listed water tower, which store the water that was required in connection with the fish canning and processing project. In terms of the site topography, the western and northern parts of the site are pretty low lying and they're waterlogged, and the southern and eastern parts rise in an incline towards Ferry Road, and the proposed housing would be sited on a plateau which rises to the raised road embankment. Just a brief outline image of the extent of the application site where work would take place. To the right of that, this here is the scheduled Category B listed water tower. These are the houses existing houses on Ferry Road, and these are the houses that are the kind of also part of Ferry Road, but as you start down into Strond. This is a very low-lying marshy area here, and here you have the HIE industrial estate as it was, with various industrial and commercial activities taking place in these units. There's a shellfish processing building here, and then across the road here there's a garage and agricultural supplies. This area here is the storage area for the fishermen. Fishery pier is down here, and the ferry pier and marshalling area down here. Proposed development, as the cover slide indicated, was for 12 single-storey houses. Construction is to be permitted over 2 phases. There's a new access road and turning head. Works to widen and alter the level on Ferry Road at the point where the new access is taken. Works for service connections, including connections to the sewer, installation of the surface water and suds attenuation basin, and then the landscaped mound and the peatland restoration. The slide shows the proposed access point onto Ferry Road and the housing layout. So again, this is the existing Ferry Road here. There will be a new junction created off that down what at the moment is quite this raised embankment and slope. There would be a widening of the road at this point, and there is like a high point in the road here, which would be removed in order to reduce the gradient of the access and egress point for the new housing. The housing themselves are a variety of different sizes. So there are a number of 3-bedded units. Materials are fairly standard, likely to be white render, grey tiled roof and anthracite coloured windows and doors. So the proposal is for 4 3-bedded units. There would also be a number of 2-bedded units, and this again is an example of lots 5 and 6. Slightly different design, similar materials. And then there's also a proposal for a double 1-bedroom unit, so 2 single-person houses. This view of the site is from the northwest, so this is taken on the ferry bypass road that was built when the ferry terminal was built for the Sound of Harris car ferry. So the site access would be in this area indicated by the blue arrow, and the site would come down off this high land onto the area of land below. This is a view of the site taken from the southwest. It's on the kind of side road that goes down to the pier. The low wet area indicated on the first slide is here, and the access point would be there, and the site would involve a levelling of this area down into the lower area here. Again, this is like an indication. This is taken on Ferry Road, looking back towards the ferry terminal. Point of access would be here, and the site would be into this brushy field that's here. You can see the proximity to the industrial estate. So these are the industrial units that were built probably about 30 years ago. Fish processing building here, garage here, and you can see the ferry terminal beyond. You can see that on the wider part of the site there is quite a lot of waterlogged areas, and it's here that the foundations of the former fish canning processing buildings can be identified. This image looks back towards the village of Lever, but again it's taken on the bottom end of Ferry Road. Again, the access would be taken from this point onto development land here. Obviously this house is one of the houses that was indicated as closer, and while it's not very obvious, this grey stone structure here is the listed water tower. You can see the primary school in the distance there and some of the traditional housing in Leverborough. The key planning issues in arriving at in considering the assessment of the application was for the need for the proposal to respect the settlement pattern of Leverborough, which is a long-standing village, and for the housing to be connected with the housing areas. The access is therefore onto Ferry Road, and while many representations were received in relation to the proposal for access, the access was reviewed from a road safety perspective by colleagues in assets and roads, and has been confirmed as acceptable from a road safety perspective. There is a requirement for the housing to connect to the public sewer, and that will be secured by condition. There's also a requirement to provide surface water drainage to the standards required by SEPA and building standards. Again, that will be secured by condition. There is a need to manage the compatibility between the proposed housing, which is on the lower side of the road compared to the existing Ferry Road housing, versus the need to protect the businesses that operate within the existing industrial area. And the mitigation is in the form of a raised bund, which will be landscaped to provide deadening of noise and also to provide a visual screen. There will be a level of peat disturbance as a result of the site of the housing, and it is proposed that that peat can be restored and maintain its properties and lock in carbon by restoring it across the wet areas of the wider site. The application has been submitted as a phase development and requires to be carried out in accordance with the approved plans. That's secured by condition. There is, however, no impediment to the two phases being carried out at the same time. It's conditioned to allow, should the developer so wish, to carry it out in two phases. The next few slides are just providing some details. So this slide just provides the drainage layout for both the water, surface water, which will be piped from each of the plots and then will be taken into this basin, which will be formed to attenuate flows, and then it will carry on further from that into the roadside ditch after it's been treated. And then the pink indicates the line of the sewer. It'll pick up the existing sewer line, and the sewer at the moment is on the opposite side of the road, just by the shore. This is just a phasing plan which would allow either these 6 houses or these 6 houses to be built as a single phase. Regardless of which phase is built first, the landscaping and noise attenuation bond would need to be put in place. And that's just like a final indication of the kind of landscaping layout. And again, with this, you can see the proposed housing layout, and again, the proximity to the water tower and the existing housing. And then the final slide just illustrates that these are the kind of low wet areas of the site where it's intended that peat disturbed from this area could be restored. Planning report was circulated to members and has set out our assessment of the various issues. The assessment has concluded that the development of the 12 houses in the rural settlement of Leverburgh, together with the associated access service and landscaping, would be in compliance with the key strategic policies of the development plan, and in particular the proposed houses would not harm neighbour amenity or the settlement pattern of Leverburgh. The siting scale and appearance of the houses, subject to relevant conditions, would have no negative impacts in relation to the other relevant policies relating to road safety, off-street parking, drainage, housing, landscape, or the national scenic area. Consideration has also been given to the policies of National Planning Framework 4. Material considerations, including all relevant planning matters raised in representation, have been given due consideration, and none individually or collectively indicate that a decision should be taken other than in accordance with the development plan, which includes the Outer Hebrides development plan and National Planning Framework 4. It's therefore recommended that the planning application be approved, subject to the set of planning conditions which are set out in Appendix 1 to the report. Ian MacLeod and I are happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Morag, for that once again very detailed report. Do members have any questions or comments relating to this item? I have one question. Sorry, I'll bring in Councillor McNeill first.
Thank you, Chair. As planners, do you have any concerns about the project being potentially phased? Would you prefer it to be done in one phase rather than two? Because considering there's peat problems and sewer works and the likes.
Mrs. Ferguson.
Planning Authority are required to determine the application as submitted. We have considered whether the development could be delivered as two phases as requested by the applicant, and we're satisfied that, subject to the conditions which are set out to secure the mitigation required, that the development could be delivered in two phases.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNeill. First of all, Councillor Hossein online.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks, Morag. I note, obviously, looking at some of the objection concern regarding the proposed access and the site being the many traffic accidents there. Was there any consideration put to additional traffic calming measures around the access? Or thank you.
Mrs. Ferguson.
The proposal and the representations were looked at in some detail, and some advice was sought from our own roads colleagues in their capacity as roads authority. They were satisfied that the volume of additional traffic that would be generated from 12 houses would not result in a level of traffic that would be unreasonable, and the mitigation measures that have been proposed in terms of lowering the high point on Ferry Road and widening the road at this point were considered to be adequate to manage the additional load that would come onto that road.
Happy with that, Councillor Hossein?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I now invite Councillor Fulton to speak?
Thanks, Chair. I'm not a member of the board, and thanks, Morag Ferguson, for the very comprehensive presentation. Obviously, this development is hugely welcomed by the local community of Harris, and particularly South Harris, which has not seen any social housing for a number of years. So, excellent proposal. Obviously, we would have preferred to have seen it all done in one phase, but we have had a number of discussions with Collier and HHP to possibly mitigate the phase development. But just to add my support to this development, I think it will be a fantastic opportunity for the community, which is struggling somewhat, and will enhance and encourage younger families to live and work in the area. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fulton. Any more comments or questions from members of the board? Therefore, do members agree the recommendation at paragraph 3.1 that this application be approved subject to the conditions set out in Appendix 1? Agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your attendance, and look forward to seeing you at the next meeting of the board. Good morning.
Thank you, Chair.